Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan is observing National Defence Day to pay tribute to its armed forces for thwarting India's attack and safeguarding Pakistan's sovereignty in the 1965 war. In his message, President Arif Alvi said Pakistan makes serious efforts towards securing peace in the region, but India keeps hostile designs. While Prime Minister Imran Khan said in 1965, nation and military proved that it is not the size but the courage and devotion that matters the most. Addressing a ceremony at the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi, Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa said the army is fully prepared to thwart any threat to the country. Islamabad has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register strong protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. The Foreign Ministry says an unarmed civilian was seriously wounded by India's unprovoked fighting in Rakchakri sector. In Belarus, police have detained dozens of protesters as thousands of people once again rallied against President Alexander Lukashenko in Minsk. They are demanding the president to resign over an alleged rigging in last month's presidential vote. Earlier, Lithuania called on the European Union to take concrete measures to help the Belarus opposition. In the United Kingdom, one person has been killed and 7 others wounded in a series of stabbings in Birmingham. Police say a murder inquiry has been launched and there is no indication that the attacks were terror-related. But Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has urged the public to stay vigilant. Mexico says it has recorded nearly 123,000 extra deaths during the pandemic, along with another 67,000 confirmed COVID-19 fatalities. Meanwhile, India has registered 1,065 deaths and more than 90,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. In Pakistan, the outbreak continues to decline as the country recorded 2 deaths overnight, while active cases have reduced to 6,269. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 879,000 lives and infected over 26.8 million people. And in cycling, Slovenia's Tadej Pogačar has won the 9th stage of the Tour de France. His compatriot Primož Roglič finished second to claim the yellow jersey, while Swiss rider Mark Hirschi ended up third. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan is observing National Defence Day to pay tribute to its armed forces for thwarting India's attack and safeguarding Pakistan's sovereignty in the 1965 war. The day began with a 31-gun salute in Islamabad and 21-gun salutes in the provincial capitals. Special ceremonies were held at the mausoleum of the founder of the nation, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and the Pakistan military's general headquarters. In his message, President Arif Alvi said Pakistan makes serious efforts towards securing peace in the region, but India keeps hostile designs. He also conferred military awards upon officers and soldiers at the President House. While Prime Minister Imran Khan said in 1965, nation and military proved that it is not the size but the courage and devotion that matters the most. Pakistan Chief of Army Staff General Qamar Javed Bajwa said the army is fully prepared to thwart any threat to the country. He was addressing a ceremony on the occasion of Defence Day at the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi. He said India's actions in occupied Jammu and Kashmir are jeopardizing peace and security in the region. He said occupied Kashmir is an internationally recognized dispute and Islamabad will not accept any unilateral decision with this regard. General Bajwa added that Pakistan played a key role in the Afghan peace process. The army chief also laid a wreath at the Martyrs Monument at the general headquarters. As Pakistan celebrates Defence Day today to mark its valiant rebuke in the 1965 war against India, the conventional warfare between the two nuclear-capable neighbouring countries has transcended into many other trajectories. What in this report by Isa Naqvi.
On September 6th, Pakistan commemorates the incredible defence against Indian infiltration in the 1965 war. Which left New Delhi in tatters on the world stage. Despite massive advantage in numbers and superior war machinery, New Delhi was forced to lick its wounds in the face of Pakistan's stern response. But defense experts believe the warfare has completely changed since then. Lieutenant General retired Abdul Qayyum says in the world of nuclear deterrence, New Delhi has realized the need to change its tactics and has opened new fronts.
They have gone on to hybrid warfare. They don't want the kinetic war, and the conventional war is out. Only limited actions can take place. But now they do it the indirect strategy.
Lieutenant General Qayyum accused India of sponsoring terrorism on Pakistani soil from across the border under its policy of defensive offense.
It's a cyber war. It's an information war. It's a propaganda war. It is a psychological war. It is economic strangulation. And it is terrorism, state terrorism India has launched from across the border or from the western border, taking Afghanistan as the launching pad.
1965 war veteran Lieutenant General retired Talat Masood says India has turned to economic warfare as a tool against Pakistan to destabilize it.
There has been a fundamental transformation as far as warfare is concerned. The main challenge now is that both are nuclear countries. So it's very difficult to really think in terms of a conventional warfare. Their motive is to bleed Pakistan economically, so that a large number, divisions and forces are deployed on the border.
Defense analysts across the board say while there remains a constant threat of a full-scale war due to the issue of Indian-occupied Kashmir, only a durable and sustainable solution to the outstanding disputes can ensure peace between the neighboring nuclear powers. Reporting for Indus News, Isa Naqvi, Islamabad.
Pakistan is observing National Defence Day to pay tribute to its armed forces for safeguarding Pakistan's sovereignty in the 1965 war. We are joined by defence analyst, retired Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi. Thank you for your time at Indus News. First of all, what was Pakistan's advantage that thwarted the Indian aggression in that war?
As far as I remember, I was in class 6th, I think, but because my father was also in the army, so I had a fair idea what all was going on, and we could see that. I think the first thing that I remember was that it is not the armies that go to war, it is a nation that goes to war, and that is what happened. I mean, otherwise also the towns of Sialkot and Lahore, they were just close. We know that they are close to the international border. People were reaching even in the trenches along with the soldiers and, raising their morale and all that. So, and on the other hand, because later on I studied this war also and carried out comparison of the training standards and the equipment standards, I think we were less in numbers, all right. But as far as the training is concerned, it was superb. And one small example, we all know that Major Aziz Bhatti Shaheed, he lost his life while using artillery. He was an infantry officer, and he was directing artillery fire, which was not his forte. But he had gone through the training and he knew that how to bring on artillery fire on the on the enemy. And if you remember, they lost total loss of tanks was 200 and something, more than 200 as far as Indian forces are concerned. More than 100 of them were lost in Sialkot sector only. That means that once tanks were fighting eyeball to eyeball, tank to tank, our people gave a better account of themselves by targeting them and by not missing the targets. So even the training was good, and the morale I've already talked about. I think there was a lot of difference once we heard the songs that were coming from our radio. Nothing of that sort we could hear from All India Radio, and even at that time the TV was also playing its role. So I think from the worldly standards, from the material standards, also we were not bad, but we had a clear-cut advantage as far as morale is concerned, as far as training is concerned. I think these were the two basic multipliers, I would say, as the question you have asked.
So, General Lodi, when we talk about the nuclear deterrence, has it eliminated the threat of a full-blown armed conflict between Pakistan and India?
We know that the nature of war has changed over time, and war has gone into different spectrums. One, that it has gone to sub-conventional mode, that we call fifth generation war. Whatever happened with us in the last 20 years is a classic example of that, that how Tehreek-e-Taliban, Pakistan was, it was, we were fighting them, and who were sponsoring them and who were behind them. So that sort of war. And also this media war and psychological war, where you undermine the morale of your opponent, where you undermine this internal cohesion of a nation. So whereas I agree with you, and I would say that yes, a full-blown war may not be a possibility, but small skirmishes, conventional forces, striking on each other in small areas like 5 kilometers up to 10 kilometers depth, that is still possible. Artillery firing, we all experience every day. But the main threat is now from this fifth columnist. The main threat is from non-state actors. The main threat is from economic undermining, political undermining. So the nature of war has undergone a great transformation. And I keep on, harping on this, narrative that we need to have one central articulating headquarter from where we can fight this special type of war, because it is not all about kinetics. It is about psychological domain, it is about media, it is about economy, it is about politics, and also it is about military. So how to prosecute such a war, how to defend ourselves in such situation, I think for that we need to review our whole higher defense organization and how we are organized.
Lieutenant General Naeem Khalid Lodi, thank you for talking to Indus News. For more on this, we are joined by defense analyst Lieutenant General Amjad Shoaib. Thank you for your time at Indus News. On this day in 1965, even with smaller numbers, Pakistan's armed forces bravely thwarted India's attack. What do you think were the major causes of the Indian aggression?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. See, right from 1947, we have been noticing that India has never reconciled with the creation of Pakistan. And they've always been finding an opportunity to damage or to dismantle the country which was created. They demonstrated their mentality in 1971, where they very actively aided all the separatists in East Pakistan, and then even their Prime Minister has admitted when he was visiting East Pakistan or Bangladesh a few years ago. So naturally, we know the Indian plans and we know the Indian mentality. But all these things are connected with as far as Pakistan is concerned, these things are connected with those outstanding disputes which we have with India. And it is the Indian Indian stubbornness that they don't want to resolve these issues. And that is why today they are even stuck up with China. They have a problem with Nepal. They have a problem with Pakistan, because they have no intention of resolving these issues. So this will continue, and our country will continue facing a threat from the Indians, because they, provided they have a feeling that ultimately at one point of time, somewhere in the future, they'll be able to dismantle this country, they'll be able to take this country, and ultimately it will be a Akhand Bharat. They will have, see, this Hindutva philosophy which is prevailing on India today. It is primarily based on this Hindu supremacy in the entire continent. So that is what one has to keep in mind, so that we have a realization for the Indian threat, the kind of threat that we are facing. It is not just a small territorial threat that we are facing, that India has an eye on some particular point. No. It is absolutely in totality against the existence of Pakistan, the threat that we are facing from India.
So, General Shoaib, what are security and stability threats to the region because of New Delhi's continuous cross-border aggression?
The strategic balance in the region has been disturbed because of the American intervention, and that they have their own strategic plans in the region against China. So they are supporting India, and in that process they are selling their high-tech weaponry. All sorts of technology is being given to them. It is for India not to take anything, or they may ultimately turn to Russia. That is their choice. But America is offering everything which they have in the kitty. So that on one hand, there's an arms race. Pakistan, because of the weak economy, cannot catch up. That is an issue with us. On the other hand, that kind of technology is not being made available to Pakistan. Americans will never give it to us. So with the passage of time, the strategic balance is tilting in India's favor in a drastic manner. And that is where this threat is multiplying with every passing day. So we have to be conscious and careful of this threat, which is, and then Indians have also, I think this fifth generation war, which we have been talking about, Indians perhaps took it very seriously. And they have gone into Afghanistan, they have spent a lot of money there. And from there, they have been trying to create internal problem, instability, and terrorism in Pakistan, which means that the country is weakening from inside. You must have heard, and we have been talking about, that Pakistan during this war against terror has lost something like about $150 billion of defense forces. They are committed on both the sides, on the western and eastern borders. So the other aspect which they have unleashed and which is going on is to create misunderstandings between the people of Pakistan and the armed forces by through the social media, by throwing some concocted stories, allegations. Smaller army can fight a bigger army if they have full support of their own masses, if they have complete assistance, they get complete assistance from every section of their society. Then I think it is always there is always a chance that the smaller army may be able to defend the country against a bigger army. There was so much of unity amongst the people, and there was so much of enthusiasm to support the armed forces.
Lieutenant General Amjad Shoaib, thank you for talking to Indus News. Now moving on, Islamabad has summoned a senior Indian diplomat to register strong protest over ceasefire violations along the line of control. The Foreign Ministry says an unarmed civilian was seriously wounded by India's unprovoked fighting in Rakchikri sector. The Foreign Office said Indian forces have been continuously targeting civilian populated areas with artillery fire and heavy caliber mortars. It said the Indian diplomat was told such senseless acts are in clear violation of the 2003 ceasefire understanding. Islamabad pointed out this year alone, India has martyred 17 innocent civilians and wounded 168 in over 2,000 ceasefire violations. The US Special Envoy Zalmay Khalilzad is in Qatar to push for intra-Afghan negotiations. Earlier, the Taliban also said their senior delegation is in Qatar to resolve issues, and a date for the talks will be announced soon. The US State Department said it is the time to start the talks as all the sides have taken important steps to remove obstacles. The statement read, Afghan leaders must seize this historic opportunity for peace. Earlier, the Taliban announced that a 21-member team headed by Sheikh Maulavi Abdul Hakim will represent the group at the negotiations. Group's spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid said Sher Mohammad Abbas Tatanakzai will be Hakim's deputy. Meanwhile, Afghanistan's National Reconciliation Council chief Abdullah conditioned the negotiations with a ceasefire. He said the intra-Afghan talks will be carried out in several phases, with Qatar set to host the crucial dialogue. Now, Kabul says Taliban have killed 2 people in Parwan province's eastern district of Sayyid Khel. Parwan's governor Mohammad Osman Yar said one of the victims was working for the Bagram Intelligence Department, but he said identities of the deceased are yet to be confirmed. The governor said 2 militants came on a motorcycle to conduct the assassination and both escaped. The Taliban have not yet commented on this incident. The International Atomic Energy Agency says Iran is continuing to increase its stockpile of enriched uranium in violation of the 2015 nuclear deal. In a confidential report, the IAEA said Tehran's stockpile now stands at over 10 times the agreed limit. The agency said Tehran's low enriched uranium stockpile grew by 533 kilograms to over 2,100 in just over 3 months. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action allows Tehran to only keep a stockpile of just over 200 kilograms. The report's release comes after the IAEA officials inspected one of Iran's 2 former nuclear sites. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani has bemoaned Tehran's friends for not standing up to the United States. In an interview, Rouhani said friends of Iran should have condemned sanctions on Tehran during the coronavirus pandemic. He said that if the US had a bit of humanity, it would have lifted sanctions on Iran for the duration of the health crisis. Rouhani said no one came to Iran's help in its fight against the pandemic. The United States has threatened to impose sanctions on whoever conducts business with Iran. Iran is the worst hit by pandemic in the Middle East, with more than 22,000 deaths. Turkey's defense ministry says it has neutralized 320 terrorists in the ongoing Operation Claw Tiger in northern Iraq. In a statement, the ministry says search and screening activities part of Operation Claw Tiger have been completed in Haftanin region. Turkish forces also seized and destroyed weapons, ammunition and other materials from 269 shelters and 53 caves in the region. The operation in the Haftanin region was launched on June the 16th to ensure the safety of the Turkish people and borders by neutralizing the threat of PKK and other terrorist groups. Ankara claims PKK is responsible for the deaths of 40,000 people, including women, children and infants. Turkey has warned Greece of painful consequences if it does not enter talks over the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Talking to reporters in Ankara, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey has political, economic and military might needed to cast off immoral maps. Erdogan said at every opportunity Ankara expressed its readiness for an equal share as long as it is just and fair. The president said Greece does not recognize Turkey's rights. Earlier, Greece pulled out of NATO-backed talks with Turkey to reduce tensions after Ankara agreed to the dialogue. The 2 NATO members have been at odds over territorial claims in the resource-rich waters. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Mexico says it has recorded nearly 123,000 extra deaths during the pandemic, along with another 67,000 confirmed COVID-19 fatalities. Meanwhile, India has registered more than 90,000 infections overnight, the world's highest single-day surge so far. Now, globally, the virus has claimed more than 879,000 lives and infected over 26.9 million people. More in this report.
With the US, India and parts of South America already struggling to contain the mass spread of COVID-19, the pandemic has now started gaining strength again in Europe. In the US, Florida state has urged people to remain vigilant over the Labor Day weekend and follow social distancing protocols. In Brazil's Rio de Janeiro, government issued similar warnings as Independence Day weekend sent people to the country's beaches in droves, despite mounting numbers of new infections and deaths.
I'm looking around and I barely see anyone wearing a face mask here. We are not chill about the pandemic, but we go out a little for some recreation. Go out with my daughter and the dog for walks, but we only stay for a little while and we go.
In Italy, rising numbers of deaths and new clusters have the government worried, but thousands gathered in Rome to protest against the mandatory mask wearing in public. Over in Australia too, police and protesters opposing restrictions clashed after an extension in the lockdown in Victoria. The state accounts for 75% of the country's total cases and deaths.
There is only one option, and that is to do this in a series of steady and safe steps. You can't run out of lockdown, because all you're doing is running into a third wave and we'll all be locked up again. I want a Christmas that is as close to normal as possible, and this is the only way. These steps are the only way that we will get to that point.
Meanwhile, in Asia, India's caseload continues to rise as governments find it increasingly hard to contain the spread of the disease. For yet another day, the country recorded over 1,000 deaths in a day, taking the tally to 70,626. Mainland China, with 10 new imported cases, has marked the 21st consecutive day of no cases of local transmission. South Korea's new cases are clustered around the Greater Seoul area, but for a fourth straight day, less than 200 cases have been reported.
Now, Pakistan's COVID-19 mortality rate continues to drop as the country reported 2 deaths overnight. The Health Ministry says the number of active cases has reduced to 6,269. The ministry said nearly 286,000 patients have recovered across the country. Its new infections rate has also decreased as 484 people tested positive for the virus in the last 24 hours. The ministry said the total number of deaths has reached 6,342, while the number of confirmed cases is over 298,000. In Belarus, police have detained dozens of protesters as thousands rallied against President Alexander Lukashenko for a fourth consecutive weekend. They are demanding the president to step down after alleged rigging in last month's presidential vote. Lukashenko had refused to resign after dismissing the allegations. Meanwhile, Lithuania also called on the EU to take concrete action to help Belarus opposition. In an interview, Foreign Minister Linas Linkevičius said EU's lack of action over the issue has undermined Europe's credibility. In Hong Kong, at least 90 people have been arrested as hundreds of protesters have rallied against the government's decision to postpone elections for the city's legislature. Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam postponed the September the 6th election for a year in July. Police said it made arrests due to illegal gatherings under the new security law. The postponement of the polls dealt a blow to the opposition, who hoped to win a majority in the council elections. Moving on to Israel, where thousands of people continue to protest near Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence in Jerusalem. They are calling for Netanyahu's resignation over allegations of corruption and his mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic. Smaller crowds also gathered on bridges and intersections across the country, calling for Netanyahu to step down. The demonstrators say government's inaptness in handling the pandemic has led to soaring unemployment. Police say they have arrested 13 people, while 2 police officers have sustained light injuries during clashes with the protesters. Netanyahu was indicted on charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust in November last year. In Lebanon, no signs of life have been found after massive rescue efforts continued for 3 days in a building's rubble destroyed in last month's Beirut port explosion. Volunteers team, including experts from Chile, cleared 95% of the rubble, but they were unable to find the source of the reading. This dashed the soaring hopes that someone could be rescued alive from under the collapsed building. A specialist sensor equipment detected a pulsing signal under the rubble, giving signs of life earlier on Thursday. The port blast killed about 190 people and left thousands of others injured and missing. In the United Kingdom, 1 person has been killed and 7 others wounded in a series of stabbings in Birmingham. Police say a murder inquiry has been launched and there is no indication that the attacks were terror-related. Britain's Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab has urged the public to stay vigilant. Police have cordoned off the area soon after the attacks. New York's Attorney General Letitia James says a grand jury will be formed to investigate the death of a black man, Daniel Prude, in police custody. Prude died after being suffocated by Rochester police officers who detained him in a spit hood. In a statement, James said the Prude family and the Rochester community have been through great pain and anguish over his death. She said the Attorney General's office will immediately impanel a grand jury to investigate the matter. The move has been welcomed by Rochester's Mayor Lovely Warren and New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Protests erupted in Rochester City this week after the Prude family released footage from his arrest in March. Now, several boats have sunk in a lake in the U.S. state of Texas during a parade to support President Donald Trump in November's presidential election. Authorities say the choppy water was likely caused by a large number of vessels moving closely together on Lake Travis. Travis County Sheriff's Office spokesperson Kristen Dark said they responded to multiple calls involving boats in distress. She said no injuries or medical emergencies were reported so far. Dark said an investigation has been launched into the incident, but there is no evidence of any intentional act. The event, called Lake Travis Trump Boat Parade, was organized on Facebook, and more than 2,600 people marked themselves as having attended it. Now, New Zealand's Governor-General has dissolved the parliament, kicking off the campaign process for the country's October the 17th elections. The 52nd Parliament of New Zealand is now considered dissolved and will not meet again, but the government will remain in full power until the election. A new parliament will meet after the general election. Advance voting will take place on the 3rd of October.
I, the Right Honourable Dame Patsy Reddy, Governor-General of New Zealand, under Section 18 of the Constitution Act 1986, dissolved the Parliament of New Zealand, given under the hand of Her Excellency the Governor-General, and issued under the seal of New Zealand on the 6th of September 2020.
Earlier, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern delayed the polls by a month in August as the country struggled a resurgence of COVID-19 infections. Now, moving on, hundreds of thousands of residents have been evacuated from the areas after Typhoon Haishan hit Japan's western coast of Okinawa. Officials say Typhoon Haishan is a Category 3 hurricane and has blasted Japan with winds of up to 100 miles per hour. Japan's government has held an emergency cabinet meeting to address the situation. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said the typhoon will bring record rains, winds, waves and high tides. Officials said Haishan, also known as Number 10, has led to power cut and closure of factories, schools and businesses across western Japan. The government has also cancelled hundreds of flights and train services in the island country. Typhoon Haishan has come just a few days after Typhoon Maysak, one of the strongest storms in many years, to hit the region. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Bangladesh, the death toll from a blast at a mosque in central Narayanganj district has risen to 20. Health officials said 40 others are injured worshippers, of which 7 are in critical condition. Fire officials suspect a gas leak to be the cause of the explosion. Officials say the blast went off when worshippers were about to leave the mosque after the night prayers. The authorities say firemen managed to bring the flames under control in about half an hour. The Bangladesh Fire Service and Civil Defence have formed a committee to investigate the incident. Now, Sudan has declared a national state of emergency for 3 months because of floods that have killed nearly 100 people this year. The country's Security and Defence Council has designated Sudan a natural disaster zone. Authorities say the floods inflicted damage on more than 500,000 people and caused the collapse of more than 100,000 homes. Sudan's rainy season begins in June and continues through to October. Rights groups in Brazil have warned that wildfires in Amazon rainforest have reached an alarming level. This comes as Brazil marked the Amazon Day, an annual commemoration of the creation of the present-day state of Amazonas. The issue of widespread wildfire has put Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro under renewed criticism. A group of environmental NGOs have launched a website called Defund Bolsonaro this week. The website says the government has taken the destruction of Amazon to unbearable levels. It also urges the potential investors to insist on firm government commitments to protect the Amazon. Amnesty International also cautioned that an alarming number of new fires have been detected in the region. UK's chief Brexit negotiator, Lord David Frost, says Britain is not scared to walk away from post-Brexit trade talks without a deal. In a statement, Lord Frost said UK will leave talks if no deal is reached till December, no matter what. He said the transition arrangement made for agreeing upon post-Brexit relations favour European Union against UK's interests. EU's chief Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier said the bloc is disappointed over lack of concessions from the UK and fishing and taxpayer support issues. An 8th round of formal negotiations is set to begin on Tuesday. UK left the EU in February, but until December, it is in a transition period to reach a deal that is expected to come in effect from January 2021. In cycling, Slovenia's Tadej Pogačar has won the 9th stage of Tour de France. His compatriot Primož Roglič finished second to claim the yellow jersey. Suez rider Mark Hirschi finished third, followed by Egan Bernal of Colombia. Adam Yates entered the stage in 15th place, 54 seconds off the pace. Yates has now dropped down to 8th overall. Defending champion Egan Bernal finished in the 5-man leading group and sits in 2nd place overall. In the National Basketball Association, the Houston Rockets beat Los Angeles Lakers by 112 points to 97 in Game 1 of their Western Conference semi-final. Houston's James Harden and Russell Westbrook contributed 60 points in total to clinch a victory in the second round of the playoffs. Lakers power forward Anthony Davis top scored with 25 points and 14 rebounds. Earlier, Miami Heat downed the top-seeded Milwaukee Bucks by 115 to 110 points in Game 3 of their Eastern Conference semi-final. Miami's shooting guard Jimmy Butler scored a game-high 30 points to stun the Bucks with 3-0 lead. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.